Hello, and welcome to the Grand Cinema Hotel, a podcast hosted by two friends who love cinema. Tonight, you'll be staying in room 182, The Royal Tenenbaums, the third film by Wes Anderson. So go ahead, get comfortable, and throw on that Do Not Disturb sign as we continue our Anderthon with The Royal Tenenbaums.
There were three extraordinary children in the Tenenbaum family. Margot Tenenbaum was an acclaimed playwright and won a Pulitzer Prize in the 9th grade.
What'd you think, Dad?
Didn't seem believable to me.
Richie Tenenbaum was a champion tennis player ranked second in the world by age 17. Chaz Tenenbaum was a financial expert and started buying real estate in his early teens.
I said sell it, yeah.
Well, I'm on my way.
They were brilliant. They were famous. They were unlucky enough to be the children of a man named Royal Tenenbaum.
He also stole bonds out of my safety deposit box when I was 14.
What's going on, all my Tenenbaums, and thank you for checking back into the Grand Cinema Hotel. I'm Gus, and as always, I'm joined with my co-host Alvaro.
What's up, guys?
And before we get started, make sure you like, comment, subscribe if you're listening on YouTube or whatever podcasting app that you listen to us on, as it helps us immensely. The Anderthon continues. Of course it did. Of course it will until, the time comes. But for now, we're talking about the third movie. I'll go ahead and say it. This is still my favorite Wes Anderson movie. The Royal Tenenbaums. Alvaro, when's the first time you saw this movie?
I think whenever 4 or 5 years ago, whenever you saw it here, I think. Yeah, that's pretty recent for me, this movie. Yeah, I didn't see this till later. I think this might be my first introduction to understanding supposedly what the Wes Anderson style was before Fantastic Mr. Fox. But since Fantastic Mr. Fox is animated, I just thought that movie of his was that way. So I think this movie was the first real introduction to Wes Anderson was for me. Maybe I keep forgetting we're in 2023, so now it'd probably be 6 years ago, something like that.
Oh, true. It has been a while. Yeah, this is a big one for me. I saw this the first time when I was pretty young because my mom was watching it. I think I talked about this in one of the other episodes, that it wasn't one where I was, I was about 6 or 7 years old when this came out. So it wasn't like I was sitting there, oh my God, this movie's so good. But I do remember just it sticking out like Ben Stiller's red tracksuits. So that's how I know I've seen this movie from a very long time ago. And it's actually a movie my mom has watched quite a few times when it would be on TV or HBO or something like that. So that was my first introduction to it, really. But I had no clue who Wes Anderson was at the time. It's kind of one of those things that didn't connect until later, where I was like, oh, I really like this guy's movie. And like, oh, that's him,
Yeah.
And it probably is around the Grand Budapest Hotel, honestly. So I think the Grand Budapest Hotel is what made me want to go back and watch all of the other ones. But this is still my favorite one as of, today that we're recording this. Maybe that'll change over the next few viewings of the other ones, but this one is just so good. And especially when we're talking about Rushmore last week, I'm just like, these are two fucking heaters back to back of wow. Talk about being at the top of the world at this point, because this is his first financial success too. It actually made a bunch of money, and it was also the highest grossing one until the Grand Budapest. So the consensus is that this is his first hit and really made him more of a household name and all of that.
Right.
And I do think too, after watching Rushmore, where we saw we had mentioned the idea of him being fully baked, but I really do think that this one actually is more it sounds funny because we already said fully baked, but more baked, but also the style and what he's really gonna become known for is born here. The storybook looking houses and the characters, the way they look like they're set out of a book. I mean, the fact that this movie gets a little meta, and it already is. Oh, it's a book. We're watching a movie about a book narrated by, I don't know, the guy who checked it out, I guess,
Yeah.
So I do think that this is where it really begins of the he's left behind who he was and is starting to enter the realm of not in reality anymore.
Yeah, this is the one I think that whenever people parody, whenever people think they're doing him, it's this movie.
It's it's like many other directors. It's like if you want to say like Spielberg is nothing but Jaws and E.T. and movies like that, or I don't know, this French director only makes this type of movie. I do think that Wes Anderson with this movie became like he's now the product of this movie. So then it's like he's always going to get kind of pigeonholed into like, oh, it's like the Royal Tenenbaums, right? Or like that's how people will see him forever now, even if he moves past that, you know?
Yeah, like the dialogue, the way it's set up here, which is more.
It's like more deadpan.
It gets more deadpan here than it did in the prior film, as you talked about when we, in Rushmore. I do think also he expands his cast here, and he also has a way better. All of a sudden, from we're talking about Schwartz having his first role, we're having here Gene Hackman, which is like, I know as good as Nathan Schwartz.
Oh, Jason Schwartzman.
Jason Schwartzman, my bad, has gone on to be now. It's not Gene Hackman.
Gene Hackman's one of the biggest actors of his day and all time.
Yeah, so all of a sudden you have here, like you said, letting go of everything. Luke Wilson and Owen Wilson are in this, and I think this is the last time they show up for a while, right?
Owen Wilson's in all of them, but Luke Wilson has never been in another Wes Anderson movie since then. So I'm glad you brought that up because I went through the filmography yesterday too. It's like he had to have popped up somewhere else, right? And Owen Wilson, it's like he stars in Steve Zissou as Bill Murray's son, right?
Yeah.
And then I believe he's in Fantastic Mr. Fox. He's in Darjeeling Limited.
Mm-hmm.
So he's in all of them, I believe. Maybe I'm wrong about one or two. I don't think he's in Isle of Dogs, actually, or Grand Budapest. So I do think there's a small break in there, but pretty consistently up until late stage Wes Anderson is he in most of his movies. But Luke Wilson is not. So I wanted to see, is there some kind of animosity? Is Future Man in any of these movies going forward, right? Which is like, I still haven't looked into that actually. But he said 20 years just kind of passes by and you don't realize that it's been that long because they're both, very busy. Luke Wilson became a pretty popular actor. I mean, he went in to be in movies like, what's that movie called? Idiocracy and things like that, So it's like he did become a star in a way that doesn't really mesh with the things that like Wes Anderson does, Like I feel like he's in a lot of bad movies, and I don't mean to say that like he's a bad actor, but I don't think that Luke Wilson's filmography is rememberable, Like I think he's likable, but I don't think that the movies he's in, like he might be bigger than the movies he's in,
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I could think of some movies you'd have to like go through his list of movies that I was like, oh yeah, he is in that. But here in like the movies he's with Wes Anderson, I'm like, that's why I like him.
I think this is his best stuff too.
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna pretend like I'm some expert on his filmography and I've seen them all, so I can say. But I don't think that that's a stretch either to say that these are his best roles. I mean, we talked about in. I forget if it was James Brooks talking about he reminds me of Montgomery Clift and in Bottle Rocket. You know what I mean?
I mean, it's like I'm thinking about like now, like remember he's an Anchorman.
Yeah, but it's a tiny,
exactly,
tiny
and it's like all of the roles that I still end up liking him now are just cameos.
Kelso's brother in that '70s show is how I remember him because he would pop in and out quite a bit.
Exactly, but it does feel like it's had he maintained with this type of reach and approach, I think he could have been more, and that's not to discredit him, like you said, but it's just his filmography is not memorable. I could agree with that.
I don't even know if, not to compare them or anything because they're brothers, but I don't know which one of them is really the better actor, but I would say that Owen Wilson has more staying power and more rememberability in the roles that he's in, well, for one, these movies, and then like stupid stuff like You, Me, and Dupree, and like what's the one that Marley and Me, where like he has Meet the Parents. So like people remember the movies he's in more than like I think if you brought up Luke Wilson, people would know what you're talking about or who you're talking about, but they wouldn't be like, oh, from this movie, right?
I mean, it's just like for me, for a while, I hadn't seen, Owen Wilson. And then he's all of a sudden in Loki. So that he's the fact that he could be in Loki, and everybody's like, "That's Owen Wilson." Oh wow, right? Like everybody knows he does that.
Yeah.
But it's the fact that what you're saying, he became a household name. Based off, even if it was just a dumb meme or the way that Nick Cage kind of is, like if it's not for the same reasons, but people know who they are.
Yeah. I mean, I think they're both pretty good actors.
I like them.
I do like them. I wouldn't go out on a limb like these are actually underrated actors of their generation. Like, no, but they are. Oh, Zoolander too. You know, like
Yeah.
even that. Like, Owen Wilson is one of the great comedy actors of his time. I don't think that's a stretch, you know, but I wouldn't go as far to say he's just like an all-time great actor. I don't think he'll be misremembered.
I think we'll remember him because we were part of it, you know. But I don't think anybody else will look back with nostalgia and think about like, damn, he was actually unappreciated.
No, properly rated, you know, which is not a bad thing. I think he does get his flowers while he's here, you know, which is not something everybody gets.
Yeah, that's good. It's good for him. I mean, I do think, I guess, in the way that we do the show, I am more enamored in terms of the stuff that he's written, though. I do end up thinking, I'm like, that stuff was like, you know,
To break it
especially,
to you, this is the end of it.
yeah. So that's what I'm saying. Like, that's more. Maybe it's because it was just a team with Wes, and what they do together is what he enjoys doing. But that is more where I think, like, had he done more of that or ventured more into that, maybe we'd be talking about a different type of, you know,
It would be nice, huh? Like
writer,
I don't know, let him
actor.
write an episode of Loki, or let him fucking like, oh well, maybe not that. That's pretty cursed. But you know, I'd like to see him maybe do a small movie or a short series or something like that.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Like, let's see what he's got, right?
Because it's like how much of obviously Wes's style ends up becoming Wes's style. Like you said, Owen Wilson only appears in some of them after, doesn't really write in them anymore, and this Wes Anderson style just gets more and more given to him. But I do wonder how much of the likeness. Because like for example, I just I do like Rushmore more than I like this movie, which I don't think I ever would have thought before. And Rushmore is written by Owen Wilson, so it's like, is that more of what Owen Wilson is, right? Like that type of approach to filmmaking, was that more 50-50? Was that more 60-40?
Oh, I see what you mean. Like maybe in this one, it's less of a contribution.
Yeah, because I'm like, is this because this, like you said, this is the birth of Wes's style? Was that the precedent? Like the story obviously is as good as it is because I do like it a lot, but is the style here more like, okay, Wes took more of the reins, which is why Owen Wilson was like, okay, it's fine, like you do your thing now. You don't need me anymore. Not in a bad way, but then I'm also like, in Rushmore, how much is that actually more Owen Wilson? How much is it 50-50, you know? Or
Same thing with Bottle Rocket, right?
Mhm.
I feel like because he is the main character of Bottle Rocket, that I always feel like when an actor is also the writer, that it kind of comes through. Like you can see it almost feels more natural. They're like, yeah, obviously he wrote these lines because look at how well he's performed.
They really
them,
set the
right?
tone.
Like it sets the tone more of like, I believe it that he wrote those lines because I'm seeing him say them and it is believable. Like as I'm watching this movie, you know, like I believe the whole thing that they're selling me.
and that's not to say like, you know, Owen Wilson and him like took more credit or whatever. I'm just saying like, it's a question that I wonder because you said it ends here. And obviously, Wes's movies become a whole different thing after this specific movie. So I'm kind of like you said, I have no reason to think there's not any, revision. He's just maybe not credited as writing them, but I'm sure he runs stuff through him still.
I wonder if it's the groundedness and the reality versus the storybook non-reality.
Yeah.
And like Wes Anderson doesn't seem to be, although the people have very real problems and emotions, the worlds that they live in are not real at all. And you know, when we did the Bottle Rocket one, I had found that interview about Owen Wilson saying like we wanted to write like The Godfather, you know? And is this also the reason why Wes leaves behind reality altogether basically for the next movies, because Owen Wilson is what was keeping him tied to the ground? And not in I'm speaking in a metaphorical sense, not a actual this guy was holding him back.
Yeah.
Like, it's just a difference in style and approach, you know? It's like if you're in an electronic band and the next guy decides he wants to make heavy metal, like who are you to stop him, right? It's not that you hate him, it's just, all right, that's your dream, go do your dream.
Yeah, and that's what I would say. It would be more because when we did the episode for Rushmore, you look into it and Wes is just as involved. Like you said, not talking about literally holding him back. I do think that's both Bottle Rocket and Rushmore, the movies Wes wanted to make. But I do think what you're talking about, them wanting to make The Godfather, and then in Rushmore, The Graduate, right?
Yeah.
And then in this, I do think maybe Wes is more like, I'm gonna make my thing. And like I do think the one thing they share, which I think is the reason why I'm sure they're still friends and they maintained a very good relationship, was the humor. They both share a very similar humor, regardless of the direction of the film. Their humor is very much the same, and I think that's where they find each other's middle ground.
I don't think it's an even fight here, but the quality of the work that Owen Wilson is in after this, because he really teams up with Ben Stiller and that group for a lot of stuff. I know humor is about as subjective as anything can be, right? But for my own personal taste, it's a lesser quality of work than the humor in these movies, right? And I understand that it's like, oh, well, that's my sense of humor. So, of course, I think that this is funnier. But like I'm saying, the movies that like Owen Wilson is in, like Drill Bit Taylor and stuff, like where he's like a teenager's bodyguard, like, I don't know. And because he doesn't write any of them and he's just an actor taking a job, it's hard to say like he's passionate about those roles.
Yeah.
But it kind of just feels weird. It's like the quality that you're in and contributing to is way lesser than what we've seen you and know you're capable of.
Yeah, and that's why I think I'm talking out of, I don't know anything in terms of why I think this was the last writing credentials to him. Was he wasn't holding him back in any way, but I think Wes kind of found out that he has his own thing that he wants to go for. He had finally reached a level, I think, where you're given a cast like this, and he's like, I could make these things happen. They're giving me the funds to make. Everybody's making, and then I think something you probably have more notes on because you've had, or like we're overlooking, is the era this movie was made in, and like the movies that were made at that time, and this did stand out. This wasn't something that was like everybody's like, what is this? I mean, like we're watching it right now, and like I always think about Gwyneth Paltrow and like her staying power still, and I'm always like, what is she in that supposedly is keeping her like, I know Gwyneth Paltrow's name, and then you see her in something MCU. Like this. Yeah, exactly. She doesn't even remember. She doesn't even remember, And then I'm like, but why did Marvel say we should get Gwyneth Paltrow? And then she's in something like this. When I rewatch it, I'm like, oh,
she's a pretty iconic character. And Margot Tenenbaum
here,
at least in the 21st century.
She's not even that old yet either. So there's a bunch of roles similar to Owen Wilson that she does later on in these movies that are pretty forgettable.
Like so much trash.
So much
mid-level studio comedies, romantic drama.
She remembers making those.
Just garbage,
She makes on to go these weird candles, right?
Yeah, goop. Or have like now she's more famous for being in court and like her court core aesthetic that people are trying to copy.
Yeah.
Her stealth wealth look that she had when she was in court because she's being sued.
Yeah. But like, that's what I mean is
all because she was this weirdo hipster chick. She's like the original hipster chick for our age.
And so like, I think that's where this movie, that's why I had like what you're talking about, commercial success. Wes becomes a household name. Everybody knows what to anticipate for the next movies. He kind of goes in different ways in some of the next movies that come and tries to, undercut it in several ways. Obviously, the movies still look a lot alike, but the stories venture a lot more and they start to get more niche, which I think, obviously dropping Owen Wilson, I do think he just kind of felt more comfortable completely diving into that. I don't know who else has the writing credentials on the rest of his stuff. Obviously, we'll look as we do
Roman Coppola is one of them, so he does end up having a new writing partner.
What I was gonna say is, we'll get to I'll look into it as we do the episodes.
Other episodes,
and then that's something I didn't know until you told me recently. And then you kind of find out about I keep forgetting his name, but
Jason Schwartzman.
Yeah, he's being related as well. You know what I mean? Like I didn't know any of that stuff, but then, hey, and just being generalizing here, being tied to a Coppola is obviously going to elevate your films to a certain other degree, especially in the industry. I do think people kind of see that as like,
that's royalty.
Yeah, that's royal right there.
Yeah. Going back to something you said a while ago, but with Gene Hackman, kind of talk about the cast a bit, because all the things that you're saying, I feel like this was a good lead up to this. The movie's written with him in mind. The role is written for him, against his wishes. He really didn't want to be in this movie. He's found Royal to be completely unrelatable and not a character that he would want to portray. He just didn't want to embody this type of guy, which is interesting because we talked about Gene Hackman in the Unforgiven episode, and he also had a lot of hesitancy taking that role. So it does seem like in the later stages of Gene Hackman's career from the 90s to when he retired, he did kind of become very self-aware of like his own image and how he wanted to be seen. And for the most part, it seems like he wanted to be seen like a good guy, you know? It's like he didn't want to be in Unforgiven. He didn't want to be in this. But he was in Welcome to Mooseport as his last movie, you know? So
He was like, I want the French Connection.
I think he got tired of that.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
that,
Yeah.
like Popeye Doyle and then like The Conversation and stuff. And like, if you don't go back far enough into Gene Hackman's filmography, like you wouldn't realize that he played like one of the hard, tough guys of an era,
Yeah.
you know? And like, don't fuck with me, you know what I mean? Like, he really is just one of the greats, you know?
And in Unforgiven, just kind of going back to a prior episode because you brought it up, he shows that side of him. Like you said, that he was hesitant to maybe take up the role. And I mean, I know, preaching to the choir, I know you love Gene Hackman. So, again, going back to the cast of this movie, I do think that, with him writing the role with him in mind, I think there's a certain tone that gets set here. And also, I mean, it's interesting that he didn't want to take it just because I do think he delivers on so much of when we've been having outside discussion of the comedic bits here, which I think he can only really, because I mean, it's probably because he's such a good actor, but they just seem like they do come out of his, like someone like him would have that wittiness.
Yeah, like just an old kind of scuzzy guy, you know, like even his name, like Royal Tenenbaum, like if that isn't a con man's name if I've ever heard one, you know?
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
the gray pinstripe suits, right? The long cigarettes, the cheap comb over, and like when the Tenenbaums are young and he's explaining the divorce, like does that guy not look like he would definitely get like caught in an audit? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And they talk about like he was a litigator and he went to prison briefly, you know, like he just embodies it so well. And I do think the fact that he didn't want to play this character is what makes him a lot like the Max Fisher character, where it's like he's a really shitty person, but his charm and his wit and his Gene Hackman's likability is what makes Royal Tenenbaum a relatable, charismatic character that you can care for by the end of this movie.
No, yeah.
And another person that was considered for this role was Michael Caine. And like, could you imagine if this was Michael Caine? Like, this would not work. Like those, your mother was a terribly attractive woman, you know, like that kind of stuff. I don't know. When I think of Michael Caine doing comedy, I think of him in Austin Powers, where they're going back and forth saying their weird British sayings, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
they're speaking their British slang that only they understand. I just don't see that. Like, I know Michael Caine was very well known as a 70s, 60s playboy back in his day, but I think what works for Gene Hackman in this role is that he's like this scuzzy Howie Ratner type of guy, but he also looks like a grandpa too.
Yeah.
Where like he's scuzzy, but he's got that grandpa thing where you're like, it's okay that he's like that, you know?
And he's scuzzy because every one of his decisions are schemes. Everything is a scheme. Nothing is just like a sentimental value. Everything is to get something at the end of it.
And then that deadpan delivery that you're talking about with the little like at the end, you know, it's like he knows he did something bad. Like Gene Hackman in this movie is the little purple devil emoji.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, he's cute, huh? But he's really nefarious,
Yeah,
actually.
Exactly. Yeah, I say don't be knowing when I be knowing.
And he's just so good with the deliveries, honestly. Like, there's just so many throwaway lines that, like, maybe if you're not attuned to this type of humor, you wouldn't even realize that they're jokes for the most part. But he's just dropping them left and right. And for it being a performance that he didn't want to do, it's really fucking good.
I wanted to, I guess this was a thought I had during the movie in terms of, since we're on the third movie, progressiveness at this point in terms of knowing how to develop a story. And what we talked about in Bottle Rocket, things taking a longer time than they should, and you being like, damn, you could have now future U2 movies in would have. So I think I really enjoyed in this movie how, like you said, Royal is this like in all of his movies, this character you're not really supposed to like, and then you end up liking him, and you don't know really why. And I think a lot of that stuff ends up coming from like the relationship he has with Richie. I think is the one that stands out the most because, as when they're kids, you see him doing the stuff that he ends up doing later, which has his nephews, and so that's how you know that that's his love language, doing all of this nefarious stuff. And Richie, for some reason, is the one that gets a lot of that. And Richie's the one that ends up loving him, right? He's the one that ends up having a soft spot for him.
That's like his only kid, actually.
But then
he has 3 kids, but he only acknowledges one of them, really.
And I mean, I guess it's because, in a way, it's a relatability that most of us probably know somebody like that. And then you're like, I love that motherfucker, but he's like never around, and then like Richie understands it, like it's still like there's love for his dad, and you're watching that, and then I mean within the first 15 minutes I think it is, you see that act with them as kids, again very similar to what he does in Asteroid City, shows you how smart these kids are, and then it gets taken away, and all of that I think in something like Bottle Rocket would have taken 40 minutes, and here he does it so fast, and I think how it ends up resonating with you and how you end up feeling for these characters, and the quote unquote I think quirkiness, depression that this whole movie kind of has, this sadness, this very oxymoronic type of mood, I think really stems from being able to establish, I feel sad at the end of this movie, but then this is a family, which is like really, I think is impressive, at least because it's just really hard to, how do you keep this movie light with a lot of moments that are really funny, but then you end up feeling sad at the end of the movie.
Yeah, like honestly, nowadays, I feel like a director who would approach a movie like this is probably somebody like Noah Baumbach, but it wouldn't be this type of same comedic deliveries and tones and humor. Like he has a very different, more standard sensibility of like what a dysfunctional family might look like.
You'd have to mesh him and his partner, my bad, but him and Greta. Like if it was shot like Barbie, but Noah wrote it, more, and then it would maybe be like Wes Anderson, and it's like kind of like, oh, if he had some of her realness or humor that she has in her movies, but then because we kind of got that a little bit with White Noise. White Noise is a far degrees off of being a Wes Anderson movie.
It's like a alternate universe Wes Anderson movie.
Like if he made
the closest you get to AI Wes Anderson.
It's if he thought certain other things were cool, yeah. Right? like a certain degree of other things. Instead of thinking Europe was cool, it's like if he thought, I don't know, like more Eastern Europe.
It's Ezra Miller, the 2 Flashes. Yeah, they're almost the same guy.
Almost. There's a like very small difference, and like
one of them wrote Madagascar 3, the other one did not.
and
the other one wrote Fantastic Mr. Fox.
And I'm sure, like again, as much as I like Noah Baumbach, I'm sure he'd be crazy to be like, "Damn, you're comparing me to Wes Anderson." And but
hey, Wes Anderson never made Marriage Story, right?
Yeah,
Marriage Story's very good.
Props to each one of them for sure. But I just wanted to basically say at this point in his filmmaking, it does seem like he has the writing down with this character so well, and I think everything past this ends up becoming why I can hear a story about a submarine or like a Jack Coureau, right?
Oh, Jacques Cousteau.
Jacques Cousteau, my bad. But like it's something that's inspired by that, and Wes could love that so much and has been able to, at the point that he makes that, and here I think it starts, be able to have your interest so well that you're there for it, and you kind of start to resonate with the characters' very niche issues, even though they, like you said, like in the world they live in, it's not terrible, but their problems seem so relatable. And I think that's but then it's like a playhouse all the time. So it's like, I don't know. I always think about kind of like, when they show in The Green Knight, when they have the two, the showing The Green Knight, how he's going to take off the little plate for the kids and takes off his, I feel like that's what Wes Anderson does in every movie.
That's funny. I wanted to go back to one last thing about the cast, because we will talk about them probably in more detail when we're discussing the movie. Gene Hackman is a big part of getting other people who are extremely famous in this movie, like Danny Glover and Angelica Houston. He kind of became a focal point for them of like, okay, well, if Gene Hackman's going to do this, I'll be in it. And then Ben Stiller and Gwyneth Paltrow actually were, pretty big rising stars at the time. So the schedule had to work around them for when they were filming because they had many other things to do, like Zoolander and stuff like that, right? So he's also working now with bigger personalities than he has, and which, like you said, there's progression in every movie. So, of course, he was worried about working with Bill Murray, but now he's working with, like, actual A-list actors, and not just one, many. And this is the beginning of the ensemble too, which is, we've been talking about the Blueprint the past couple episodes. This is where that kicks in, and it only gets crazier.
Stable.
From here, right? And this is a huge staple piece of his, is every role is filled by somebody who is either A, a really good actor who is unknown, or B, a major celebrity who will do one or two lines or something like that, right?
Yeah, because I mean, here, to add on to your point, a lot of them, this is the first time he ends up working with them, right? And they stayed. Like with Angelica Houston, this is the first time he works with her, and she stays.
Yeah, she's in Steve Zissou. Bill Murray stays after this.
She's in Darjeeling Unlimited, I think so too. And like, Bill Murray is the one he establishes in the last movie, the first one. We got him.
Gene Hackman does not only because he doesn't retire, but he also just does not fuck with Wes Anderson.
Oh, really?
No,
That's what I was gonna get at. Was the next point I was gonna say? Gene, he doesn't work with, but I'm not sure if that's because of his age. I haven't looked into that, obviously.
Well, Gene Hackman's like 90, almost 100 years old now, and he is alive and kicking and well. He just chose to retire almost 30 years ago now. Yeah.
Yeah, like he could. Yeah, I mean. I just, this role of his, I've seen so many movies now throughout the years of him in it, and like this role is just my favorite one so far. So I mean, it's he's such a seasoned vet, And
yeah, there's not really a presence like him now today.
Like you said, it'd be like I guess. I don't watch the show, but there's obviously a lot of comparisons to it. They're like, I wish they would sit down the Tenenbaums with the Roy family. I want to see, but then the actor who plays in Succession, that older, that's the only one I can think of. But he's a TV actor, not a movie
Brian
actor.
Cox?
Yeah,
Yeah, he's had a crazy long career because he's been in the stage, he's been on TV, he's been in small roles, big roles. He's had resurgences, but he's the first Hannibal Lecter ever portrayed on screen. But. Oof, the Roys and the Roys and the Tenenbaums going toe to toe.
yeah.
I'm gonna say Logan Roy would murder Royal Tenenbaum, but that the Tenenbaum kids would eat the Roy children alive because the Roy children are strictly nepotism. The Tenenbaums are actual geniuses.
They're smart, yeah.
Because one of the long running jokes of Succession is that, like, why do any of these three think that they could do this? Because none of them know what the fuck they're doing or are good at it.
Yeah.
Like they are the ultimate fake it till you make it, even though they're already billionaires, and they're still trying to prove that they can do it.
And that was like a lot of comparisons. Now, retrospect, looking at this, I think people who like Succession really like this movie, and it's the same concept. It's just done like, dude, the Wes Anderson
is also right in that same thing. It's like the dysfunctional family, power struggles, big personalities,
being known outside, like being known families,
the family
right?
being known, not just one person.
Yeah, and struggling with, because I mean, this is realness in any type of sorts. Like when families are big like that, we hear about all the Skarsgård,
the Kardashians,
the Skarsgårds, right? But like we don't know the Skarsgård that don't do anything. They're just like us.
Yeah, there's like 25 Wayne's brothers and sisters, and then all of their kids. Yeah,
and like the pressure, we think we feel pressure. How about having the name and being like, oh, I'm just a gardener?
Imagine being in a well-known, famous family where like 35% of your family is famous, but then you're part of the one that's just not. You're like, wow, talent really did skip you.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like
God was unkind when He made you.
Just very good plumber.
Yeah,
very good plumber. And it's I forgot what prompted this conversation or we were talking about, but
we're just talking about the ensemble cast and the characters, like.
Oh yeah, the comparison to Succession, the family. So yeah, I think that's some of the themes that linger into this movie. Obviously, Gwyneth Paltrow's although she's very smart, she never feels like she's part of the family,
Yeah, 'cause
right?
she's adopted.
Yeah.
Right.
So, I mean, that's obviously a very big theme in this movie, but
A little bit of incest, pseudo incest, right?
I did want to bring up that Succession anecdote because I was like, oh, I'm bringing it up to guess. I think it's really
As
funny.
an enjoyer of both, yeah, it would go half and half. Royal's a fucking con man. Logan Roy, the entire time I watched Succession, I was like, when are they gonna go back to the part where they like either flashback or allude to the fact that he definitely murdered like at least 3 people?
Yeah.
You know, because Logan Roy could be, from a certain point of view, a war criminal. You know, 'cause
Yeah.
he runs what is essentially Fox News in his world. So, you know, he's up there. And this guy fucking
You can't get
steals from his kids. You know?
He's trying to do all this and just have a couple nights to chill at the house.
Yeah.
There's no master plan.
I always think, you know, it's funny. It's like, I don't want to get off on this tangent too much, but like Royal Tenenbaum, as scuzzy as he is, when he's laying there in the bed, and then Chaz is like, get out of my house. He's like, give me time to gather my things.
Yeah. And, I guess I'm leaving.
Yeah. He's just laying there dying. He's like, okay. Pagoda, let's go.
We've been found out. No, but yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, so I did want to talk about the movie. You know, let's dive into that a bit because we could talk about the characters in there because the movie is just all about these characters, right?
Yeah.
So the Tenenbaums are a family that is very washed, right? That is honestly the best way to put it.
Yeah.
We're seeing them way past their prime here, but they were a family of young geniuses. Their 3 children, all of them spectacular at what they do. Chaz, the oldest, is a a savvy businessman and entrepreneur, right? As a small child.
Mm-hmm.
Margot wins a Pulitzer Prize and is a playwright. And at 17 years old, Richie becomes the 2nd ranked tennis player in the world. Royal was a well-known litigator in the 80s until he was disbarred and briefly thrown in prison.
Because of his son.
Right. With Etheline, I don't remember if they say that she was an author, right? And she wrote the book
About their family.
about them, Family of Geniuses, right? But then she goes on to become an archaeologist. And do you remember I brought this up in the very first episode that when I was discussing Wes Anderson's family, I was like, they're the Tenenbaums. And his mom is an archaeologist and his dad was like a real estate guy.
Oh, yeah.
So if you want to talk about personal, we've talked about this with the other 2, but this is for sure right up there, you know, like as in the inspiration for the movie. I don't think that this is a beat for beat. This ain't a Fableman situation, I don't think, where it's
this
like...
happened to me.
I'm getting out some trauma, bro.
Hey, Wes Anderson has a stepsister. Huh?
Oh, God, please no. I can't
An
afford to
adopted
lose
sister, my
another
bad.
one.
Adopted sister. Oh, no.
But yeah, I would say this is not as personal in terms of like how close this cuts to home. You know, I do think it's like when a filmmaker's like, my parents got divorced and then I made a movie about divorce. You know, he's like, all right, take it easy, mom. This isn't about you. You're not the only person who's ever been divorced. You know, like this is just my general thesis on divorce. The Fablemans was like, he's like, I literally had to wait for my parents to be dead to make this.
I got something to say.
Yeah, right? Like, I'm sure Wes Anderson's parents probably could have seen this movie and they're like, that's crazy. I don't know who he's talking about, you know? Spielberg's dad's probably sitting in the audience like this if he was alive. It's like, oh, God. They're showing the part where I got cucked.
They're so over.
Oh, man. But, yeah, very personal film. In the beginning, there's a lot of allusion to the real family because it says, like, to my family, you know? And Wes Anderson is the author of this world, so when you see the book and it opens and it says that, I think that this is kind of a love letter to his family. Because at the end of the day, this is a very sad movie, but I do think that this is still an optimistic, hopeful movie by the end, that dysfunctional families can be brought back together.
Yeah. Which
is like, oh, sue me for having a little sentimentality, right? But I do think that, this is a good coping mechanism version of My Parents Are Divorced movie, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's like a more of grandization, you know, and a memoir. It's characters based on your family. It's a whole other thing on its own, obviously, like you said, but those are the real reasons why some of these directors that we talk about end up standing out, is they could talk about their experiences, right? Something that Martin Scorsese talks about, and the personality and personal things that happen to these directors are the reasons why I could never tell the story that Wes Anderson tells, or none of the directors that we have can really compare to each other. And I think sometimes, you know, some of the unoriginality does come in terms of even what up to where we are. Like Bottle Rocket was made to be like, oh, we wanted to make The Godfather and The Graduate for Rushmore, but here it's just I made something based off my family, which nobody else can make.
Yeah, like these kind of stories will always be deeply personal, just because everyone's family experience is so different. You know, not only because it's just your family, but like also the style of how you're going to tell the story as well, right? Because anybody could make the Royal Tenenbaums as a movie, but it would be wildly different and varied from each person.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Like
yeah.
tone and the substance and who these characters are, you know? And like I do think like one of the other, kind of going back to the blueprint here, one of the things I like about what this movie does as well is like every character in this movie is essentially a Max Fisher.
Yeah.
Like Rushmore had one. This one is everyone is this, because when you're seeing these montages that he becomes known for, and, you know, take it or leave it, whether you like it or not, obviously we love it. We're here doing the whole fucking series about him. But you see that even when they're talking about the thing that they're best at, it shows like there are 3-4 other hobbies that they're also like pretty proficient at, you know? And it's just this Max Fisher type of character. And I always wonder if this is kind of Wes Anderson's like a sense of optimism, you know, that he's like, look at what people are capable of. And like, I know that this is supposed to be a regular, or not a regular family, a family of geniuses, but I like the way it kind of looks at humans, you know, and is like, look at what anybody could be capable of. Like, I play tennis, I play the drums, I have a car collection, I have this. And I don't know if that's all shallow, surface level stuff to other people, but I like the way he characterizes people through their activities and hobbies and things like that. You know, like it really makes them feel lived in.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I mean, I think he sees the richness in being human as the versatility to do all these things. And, you know, I think he does understand that maybe I'm getting a little too deep here, but like, did he understand that a lot of the characters that he make are kind of well off with money, or they're, you know, in this niche world, but in this niche world with flexible time, you would be able to do all of these things. And I think it's almost in a way saying ideally, what he thinks would be a perfect world would be if all of us, you know, could have all this versatility, all this.
I'm a psychologist, and I'm also living on this ocean liner, and we're going to here and whatever, you know. And it's like that is like you said, like obviously if you get too into like the social connotations around that, it's like rich white people, right?
Mm-hmm,
like,
which is a criticism of this.
That's the criticism of his work, right?
Yeah.
But I don't think the outlook he has on life is because of like based around the fact that it's like rich and white, you know? Like,
No.
I don't think Wes Anderson's like, oh, and I want this to not happen to anybody else either.
Yeah, exactly. No, I do think, again, the same way that we praise Sean Baker for making super raw, gritty, you know, or the Safdie brothers because they came up, they're through the grit like us, you know, and like, but there's the opposite side of that, of somebody who did grow up not saying like, oh, it was easy, because it's a different life. And I think that a lot of his films end up showing that even these niche characters that could have everything, you know, and that's in all of them past this, that they have very real problems, and they have things that are very relatable in terms of depression, anxiety, etc. And I think that is more groundedness in what you said, to be the human element is you can have all of these things and do all of these things, but your problems remain the same. And I think in a play world set where everything looks so perfect, to still have that commonality between, you know, ruggedness of anybody else or whatever is his trademark.
Yeah, sad people in beautiful places. Right?
Yeah, and, you know,
he's perfect for internet core, huh?
because I mean, in reality, the same way that they always, you know, as a kid growing up, the cliche thing back, someone in Africa is hungry right now, and you're throwing that away. I'm sure there's this connotation with, he's from California, how sad can he be? It's like where you're from, or the things that you're around, or like well, at least you're always in the sunny place, you know what I mean? But it always comes with that supposedly these places that you're at come with expectations, and the same thing with money. Like, because you have a certain amount of money, there's just expectations on you, and sometimes going back again to, you know, Succession or the stories that have to do with families, that the pressure of having that and not being good at anything is just as bad.
Yeah, like the Roys are the most pathetic people.
Or, you know, one of my favorite movies this year, and I know you like too, like Sanctuary, which tells you, you know, it's like it's bad to be poor, you know, and like, oh, I want more. But it's a lot worse when you have money and you still know, like, you're not anything. Like, you only have this money because your dad had money. You're not a great man. You're not a great leader. You're nothing. You just have this money because, and that feeling is very, like, that's a whole other depression I don't know about, and I will never know about. You know,
and like just because I'm of a lower class too, it feels like wrong to just be like, fuck you, you're rich, you know? Like,
yeah, that's, I mean, in a
it dehumanizes them. Like, rich people cannot be human, right?
Because not
like,
every single one is evil. Like you said, obviously the intention always, like you said, in this capitalistic world, having money does supposedly, you know, schemers, right? Royal schemer. But I do think that that's not the reality. Like, you know, kids of rich people don't end up being as talented sometimes as somebody who had to work for it, and they have to live with the pressure of you constantly being like, you ain't, they know they're not special, but what are they supposed to do? Just give up everything and be like, sorry.
I guess I'll go be like a monk
struggle.
Yeah,
Like, and then that's, I mean, I do think that's like a lot with Gwyneth Paltrow's character in this movie embodies that a lot, that you're the Tenenbaum, but then I don't want to be tied to being a Tenenbaum. Like, I got adopted into this. That's why she had all those secrets, you know what I mean? Because they're not Tenenbaum things to have, but it's the same thing, you know, getting bigger here again. Why does every political thing go be like, well, what about Hunter Biden? Like, what does his actions have to do with anything, you know? But that's always like the look, he's not a perfect, and he had this perfect house. Be like, but why are we just talking shit on somebody who has nothing to do with anything? Just to be like, look, he's wasting his name.
Leave that crackhead alone.
Yeah, exactly.
God, let him be a loser in peace.
Jeez. We're getting you know, sidetracked, but I do think that's like Wes is very niche, very good at doing that. Is basically portraying this depression, this emotion that crosses everything, you know, monetary status, races, anything you get, religion.
It is interesting that people see this, you know, because like movies, I can't say it's their ultimate goal, but you know, most filmmakers would like you to feel for their characters.
Yeah,
you're in their
in there.
shoes,
Yeah,
a sense of relatability, make you feel empathetic for people you never thought you could.
How we feel about
people
Goku?
Who are unlike you. That's the whole point. It's to connect, to tell a story, like a human connection through storytelling, right? And then you would just throw it all away because they don't match you. Like, well, I'm poor, so I don't know what it's like to be. Oh, so what? Because you're poor, no one in your family is smart. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like to throw it out the window, you know? And like, I don't know. Maybe this is too much insight into how I grew up, but you know, I am obviously Mexican, but I never like. It wasn't something that was like, and this is fortunate. Like for the most part, it wasn't constantly thrown in my face every day, right? So it wasn't like if I told my friend, like, "Oh, do you watch Friends?" What the fuck, fool? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, wait, why? Did you not have any friends? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't get it. You know, like, oh, have you ever went and got lunch with your friend? What the fuck? Joey and Chandler, those white fools be like, you don't know what it's like to have a best friend that you do silly stuff with? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, why are you acting like this has anything to do with who they are, where they're from, whatever? Like,
exactly. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I
like,
get that.
Whatever.
I mean, that's the constant joke online. Like the dudes, they see Goku. That's literally me.
That's literally
you know
me.
what I mean?
It's
like, you know, Ryan Gosling. Like, me and you don't go, he's white. He's not like me at all.
Yeah.
Like, he's me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, he's literally me.
If he was Ryan Gomez, he would be
me. Yeah, but
you know,
no.
like,
and obviously, on the other flip side of stuff, we do talk about, you know, being properly represented. But I don't, if I really close myself off, be like, I'm only a cook in Quentin Tarantino's movies. You know, like I can't relate to any of the other characters. Or be like, I wish I was X, Y, and Z. You know what I mean?
Don't cry in front of the Mexicans.
Yeah, he was talking about me right there. And
yeah, for real.
I do think that's it's almost like giving a smart answer back when you kind of criticize movies like that. Another criticize of this movie that I saw very, very similar to this, and I think it's kind of funny because in the beginning when they're talking about when he sees her play, he kind of criticizes it's just a bunch of kids up there.
He's like, it's not even believable.
Somebody's negative criticism of this movie was that she didn't find any of the characters likable or relatable, and that this just doesn't make any fucking sense. Like, when people could be like this, and it's kind of like, well, do you guys judge movies based off of if this person is a good person or not?
Yeah, some people do.
Like, be like, I can't relate to this. Like watching American Psycho and be, he's a very bad man. I think this is a bad movie.
Yeah, no. That like, I don't know if that's media literacy or what exactly you would call that, but people are so bad at the idea of, like, obviously Christopher Nolan thinks that the nuclear bomb was good because he made Oppenheimer.
Yeah.
There's no way that it could possibly be a criticism of it, because why would he even make it? Like, we should just not talk about it,
Yeah, exactly.
Or like this, like, obviously Wes Anderson loves absent, deadbeat fathers who steal from their children. Like, he obviously thinks he's a good person, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Wes Anderson must be.
And why does he kill the dog all the time?
Ever think maybe he's a dog murderer? I bet you Wes Anderson would love Under the Silver Lake.
Yeah. So, that does go back to there's some criticism here where I think, like, oh, this is just rich people having rich problems. But no, I didn't think maybe because me and you are fortunate enough to, I grew up a little differently than you, but I did grow up in a quote unquote white area. And some of the people that I ended up meeting, they had these experiences. This were the, their parents being successful in certain ways, and then having that pressure of, like, and you're not going to be a deadbeat, right? And, or overprotectiveness from their parents because X, Y, and Z happened. And I mean, I see that in Chaz's character, of, like, a lot of the moms that I grew up with, my friends, they only had single moms, how much they would be worry of their kids. So again, this is not based off of this Ben Stiller is a dude, a single dad. I don't get it. I see all of those things, and I think it doesn't matter where you grew up. It doesn't matter what nationality you are. These are things that happen, the human element.
Or Richie. He's like, how every family, like, unfortunately has a Richie
in
them, where it's like, maybe he wasn't the second ranked tennis player in the world, but it was like, damn, this fool was really good at football or running track, and he went to college, and then, I don't know, this fool had a meltdown. Like, it was never the same. Oh, damn, he tried to kill himself, like, literally this kind of stuff happens to, unfortunately, many, many families, and it doesn't have any kind of barriers between race and class or anything like that. It's like, or Royal himself too, like, even the type of grandpa he is when you see him, or how he, the sneaky little things he does with the kids, take him to dog fights and stuff. Like, I used to go to horse races with my grandpa, you know what
exactly.
I mean? So it's like, and we weren't rich, it wasn't like some crazy thing, but it's like, yeah, just doing bad stuff. Or like, I remember I went to a boxing match with my grandpa, like stuff like that. Like, just like the boys will be boys type of deal.
Right.
And
exactly.
it's like, what does any of that have to do with this fake made up fairy tale fantasy of, like, rich people?
Yeah. And I again, I think as you get older and you're relatable, and to different degrees, maybe you're more closer to Gene Hackman's age, you have an Angelica Houston. You messed up your past. You messed up your family. So for any dynamic in this movie, there's so much. The cast is so huge. There's so many different angles here that there's she's literally me. He's literally me. That's my brother. That's my cousin. That's that's somebody's family that I know. And I know that's not also the same way media literacy for me to be like, and that's why I like this movie. But that's the way that you connect with these characters. And I think at the end of the day, it ends up going down to human emotions and the type of regrets we have as humans, the type of hopes that we have, loves, disparities, all of these things. That's what makes the language of cinema, why we sit here and talk about these movies week by week, but also why Wes Anderson's movies seem to deliver for me, is because, yes, they're made on this play set. Yes, they're made to look a certain way, and that's using the camera to its full extent. Things don't look that way in real life. Things don't look that beautiful, but in the same beautifulness, there's this sad realness, right? And I just think his style to how to convey that idea is unique, and I'll be here for as long as he does it.
Yeah. You know what? I always try to think about how to, like, convey his movies as, like, an object, right? And, like, I was thinking about, like, what would it be? And, like, my man loves France, right? Like, imagine, like, a beautiful, aesthetically pleasing, perfect anime Studio Ghibli drawing of a fucking croissant, right? But then on the inside of the croissant is like this stuff that's actually good for you and nourishes you and makes you feel alive. You know what I mean? Like, and that's like a Wes Anderson movie to me. It's like this perfect breakfast croissant, but then it has like kale and spinach and eggs and tomato. Like, you know what I mean? Like the thing that people were saying that Ice Spice made that would make them throw up. That, but in a croissant, you know?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, exactly.
Look at that perfect protein breakfast or whatever, you know? You're like, and look how beautiful it is too to look at it. And you're like, oh, then you bite into it, you're like, and it's healthy.
It looks, yeah, it looks appealing to the eyes. It is really good for me, and it's also very niche, like you said, French. Like a French croissant, you know what I mean?
I had to make a genre. I had to make a genre appropriate.
It wouldn't be a regular pan. It had to be.
Nah, man, no pan. The public don't know about pan.
Yeah, exactly.
But you know, let's talk about the things I really like about this movie. Obviously, the characters, right? I mean, these are up there with some of his best, and honestly, his most iconic. I think Margot Tenenbaum. Well, you know, your mileage could vary on if she is the best character or not. I do really think that she is maybe the one that sticks out. Like, she is the aesthetic, you know, like her. And I do think, you know, you brought this up too, speaking about the soundtrack, back to the Blueprint as always, right? The amazing soundtrack of 70s, 60s rock and roll and stuff like that. Margot Tenenbaum's appearance is based off of Nico, the singer, that we're, you know, obviously. Anyone who gets into the Velvet Underground eventually finds out about Nico, and you're like, oh, she's sick.
She's it.
Why can't more models now be like Nico? Huh? We're like, fuck all this dumb modeling shit. I want to make cool music, and like people should take me seriously.
Yeah. I mean, you know, that's a whole other discussion with Nico and the Velvet Underground. That's for the no, there was beef there. No, yeah, but that's like a if you know type of thing, right? Because I do think let another sidebar conversation. Like very recently, they had voted for, I guess, the best cover of all time in the Velvet's Underground, or Andy Warhol's the banana one, and who the fuck is that? You know, and like, damn, like I
bro, it's not even better than Gunna.
And it just kind of like you talk about resonance of things again. And like, yeah, we're talking about Nico in a movie in 2023, and then like me and you know exactly who that is. Certain people know exactly who that is. The aesthetic of this character might be something that girls for years later, especially during the Tumblr era, tried to reproduce, and it's a girl from the 70s.
That they don't even know, well, 60s too.
60s, yeah.
Like 60s and 70s, but that they don't even know that that's where they're getting it from.
And again, this is why we enjoy movies. This is why someone like Scorsese would be like, go study the masters. Wes Anderson was so inspired by Nico that he was, you know, I'm going to make this character resemble a lot of what you would assume is her aesthetic or what she would be like. And again, like you said, I think it ends up being like the perfect culmination or the blueprint of the character that everybody thinks about when they think about a Wes Anderson movie. Whenever the AI machine does it, it always does the girl just like her character. Every single girl is just like her character.
Yeah.
So if the computer can pick up on
monotone,
it, you know what I mean?
I mean, Aubrey Plaza's whole early career is basically based off of acting like Margot Tenenbaum.
Yeah, yeah. I like that you brought that up. Exactly. Like, it's just, especially at the time, like we talked about the era, nobody was really doing that anymore, at least. Obviously, you go back.
There was nobody like her.
There's Deadpan, obviously, but like at the time, it wasn't something that you would necessarily think is a way to make a great role in a movie. And like for her to, we're talking about it now, and I do think as much as I like Royal, I think because I love the movie so much, you know, it revolves around him so much. And with Gene Hackman, is I do think her character, it's to everybody, is the one that stands out the most. I think, you know, for me, it is Richie. But because I actually, like, for this movie, when I was watching it, I think it's because I'm more familiar with it. I was kind of like, you know, familiar with it. Not like I was watching Rushmore, kind of more like, dang, this is so good. For with this one, I was kind of like, okay, like I remember I really liked this movie. But then when it gets to the third act, I remember why I really liked this movie. And in Rushmore, I didn't feel like the ending brought it up a whole level for me. I just felt like it was consistent the whole time.
It's like starts off hot, ends hot. Right?
Yeah, like it goes up to a degree and it stays there the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the first 30, 40 minutes of the Royal Tenenbaums is kind of like, what the fuck is this, right?
Yeah, like if you've never seen it and you don't know what you're getting yourself into, I think it's kind of like if at that point you could drop it because you're like, I do not like the tone of this movie. Like, what is this movie? Why are they talking like that? Why is it shot like that? Why are these characters? Why am I supposed to care about
Why is
these
there so much
characters?
exposition, right?
Yeah, and or like you again at the time be like, why is it starting off like a play? What is it? We're like, what is this? And I think as you get towards the end of the film, you end up realizing what all of this is. And I think that's like as yesterday as I finished the movie, as like it ends and you're like, I wish it didn't end. That's how I felt about this movie, as opposed to, like I said, I like Rushmore more, but I just think it's because it's very small difference. But I do think it's interesting to me how the like set play, everything making it look like a dollhouse ends up working in the favor for a conclusion for the third act.
I think maybe what you're feeling of this, like Rushmore is a better movie to you, but there's something about them. It's like, I think it's because it sounds cliche and all this to say, but it's like you feel like you're part of this family by the end. Like you've been through their journey. You don't want to let them go,
Yeah.
Like, damn, I'm never going to see them again. Or like, when if you go to like someone's house and then you're like, you feel sad when you leave because you're like, I don't know when I'll be back in their environment again or whatever. And it's like, there's the line in the movie, like, I always wanted to be a Tenenbaum. And Royal even says, like, me too, like he feels like an outsider in his own family. And then you see like Eli, and like, I don't think Eli is supposed to be the audience, but I do think that's like, he is meant to convey that feeling of like when you're around a family that you want to be a part of, and I do think that this movie works well in favor of that for us, the audience, of like, I care about these people by the end. Because I know that they've all been through a lot, and it's satisfying to me to see them reconnect.
I mean, I think that's just where, to me, where I said it's like it's a small difference, because I do feel like I don't think about in Rushmore Max's character after the movie. I'm like, that was cool. You know what I mean?
Rushmore kind of has a little bit of what the player has, where it's like, in the player, you're like, God, he is a piece of shit.
Yeah,
he's getting away with it, right? But it does have that like, and yeah, the annoying kid won.
Yeah.
Like Royal redeems himself and his family, like his saving grace is that he saved his family before it was too late, and like his spoilers, obviously we're talking about a movie that's fucking 22 years old here. When he dies at the end, earlier in the movie, he's talking to Richie and he's like, God, look at this grave. Like, I want something like that. And then when he passes away and you see his gravestone, it's like, died tragically saving his family in a battleship from a sinking battleship. But that is what the Tenenbaums were for all those years. And yes, it's because of him for a lot of it, but everyone has contributed to this mess of why this family is this way, because they also have a lack of forgiveness too, I would say, right? Like there's no wanting to reconcile with him until they think he's dying. And even then, some of them have to be like tooth and nail, but he saved, like that's his get into heaven card, that he saved his family before it was too late.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's
brought them back together.
I think that's why I said like the third act ends up being, to me, like, oh shit, is because, you find out Richie and Bill Murray's character find out about Gwyneth Paltrow's past, right? Tensions
made me a cuckold.
Tensions get high.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then Gene Hackman's character, Royal, gets found out. So then you're like, what the fuck is this fool going to do now? So he goes through his whole other life. You get a little bit of what he's doing after, you know what I mean? And but him coming back together to the family did cause everybody to let the cat out of the bag, right? Because he came back, you found out that Eli was cheating, right? Or they had an affair with them, and then you find out that she found out that Richie's in love with her. All these things happen because he does come back, like
Richie you said. Eli, just to add on, his drug addiction, because he's on mescaline and stuff, right? And like his lack of, like, he's a very sad character too, like, because there's not really any bad guys in the movie except for Royal, I guess. But, you know, like, he's a very sad character, too. Like, always wanting to be part of this family, always wanting validation. You know, why would they go out of their way to say I'm not a genius? He's like, that's weird, no? You know what I mean? By association, he's
geniuses.
He's part of the genius family, and he's the one who's not, you know? And he's like, why would you go out of your way to say that? You know, like, that little line, it sticks with you the whole time. Like, when you're thinking about his character, and it's like, this is what he has been dealing with his whole life.
And that even starts with this first scene, like when he's across the street as a kid.
Yeah,
like he's so obsessed with them, you know what I mean? And like I said, that's a scene that goes, 2 seconds?
Yeah.
And you establish that there, and then you, like you said, I've always wanted to be a Tenenbaum. You believe it because you're like, I saw it. I saw it from the first scene. This fool was like, who cares about my family? What about this like wanting to associate with them, wanting to associate with what it is to be a genius. And again, the pressure of, but I'm not in that family. So what can I do about that? Nothing. So that's why he's on drugs all the time. You know what I mean? It ends up being like all of these, him coming back to the family again, helping the sinking battleship. He finally divorces, right, with him, so she could finally get remarried again.
Even Royal, when he divorces her at the end?
Yeah. Like she could finally get married again and finally get over, like, why is it she hasn't been with the man for so long? I'm sure Royal fucked that up for her. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, when finally he came for closure, everybody finally like, okay, yeah, Richie found out the worst. It almost went sideways pretty bad, right? You know, but like at the end of the when the movie ends, like you said, there you see him happy. And like that's the validation you get as the viewer, and like the whole like, oh damn, so stuff is gonna be okay. And then that's why you're like, damn, I'm sad I'm not gonna see more of this. And then he does little excerpts like right now we're watching it, like shows you their in between lives, just really fast, you know. And then I do think those little segments end up showing like the sadness that these characters have are very real.
Yeah.
Lived in, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I will say too, like for each character, I feel like they all like you said, like let it go, you know, like Margot, like her truth comes out, and her also insecurities of not actually being a genius, you know. And Royal has that little line where he's like, but well, they actually did say you were one, you know, like others have said that about you. It isn't just a family thing that we're propping you up like that, you know. And it's like you really are one, and like her come to grips with like maybe that's not the life that she's gonna have. And like, you know, at the end they're like, she has the play that for 2 weeks and middling reviews and whatever, but it's like a sense of direction because she doesn't really have any. It's like she hadn't written a play in a long time, and I think she as well, like as everybody else, needed this type of like closure. And it's like it's funny and tragic that it has to be like their dad dying to finally be like, we can move on with our lives now, you know. But hers is like, you know, hers is pretty heavy because of just all these different like things that are going on with her, and how she's got this like pseudo incest relationship with her stepbrother, and never really feeling like she belongs in the family, and then the pressures of being a genius, and then married to this guy who like, I don't, you know, Bill Murray seems pretty innocent as a character in this, right? Like as a bystander, like there's no reason why she would do this to him other than she's just a scarred person, right?
I mean, I just think it ends up being that the uncomfortability of maybe being in love with your stepbrother, I mean, your adopted brother, and the uncomfortability that comes out because of who you are, but then living in that discomfort, honestly, for a long time. And I think that ends up being her also like boiling point, you know, like at the point in the movie we don't know, we just think she's a character who's just sad, you know, but then you do see her at the end of the movie, like you said, happy, content. And it does seem like now that, well, they end up obviously not keeping it a secret how much they like each other, and they openly.
But it can't be done, you know? Like there's like, much like Rushmore, there's that acceptance and like shifting your perceptions and expectations of like what you want life to be and then what it actually is, and finding the joy in the life that you actually have. That seems to become a recurring theme, at least with these two movies. And then we'll see going forward, right? I mean, sometimes they do get a little lost in the sauce. Like Steve Zissou is so deep into being a genre weird film that the themes and the, like what's going on in that movie, I do think get a little overtaken by the genre. You know?
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
And like really diving into the absurdity of like these worlds and stuff. But not trying to talk about that movie too much right now. But Richie as well too. Like, you know, he's got that fucking beard and the glasses, and like he's obviously, that's a mask, you know? Like I don't I don't know. That seems like movie watching 101, right? It's like this character's obviously trying to hide his face and like hide his truth, you know? And even when he was playing tennis, I thought it was an interesting touch that they had him wearing the sunglasses, because it's almost like that's like the beginning of like the meltdown happens, but he's wearing those glasses, so it's like he's already hiding his face.
Yeah.
And it's probably because he's been in love with her since his whole damn life, and he knows it's not okay and that it will never happen, and like that's an ugly cross to bear. You know, like it also alludes on to that fucking weird family relationship thing that Wes Anderson is also interested in, of like taboo things about family. He's luckily not taken it too far yet.
Yeah.
You know, but skirting that line of like what's socially acceptable and not. And I always think of the line too, and Royal's like, it's frowned upon, but what isn't these days?
Yeah, but what isn't these days? That's good.
Like even Royal, you know, like as fucked up as he is, he looks at his son and he's like, live your truth, dog. Like I don't know what to tell you. Like, yeah, it's fucked up that you love your adopted sister, but you're gonna have to learn to just accept that, you know? Like he's still able to give his son like some kind of sense of like, it's okay. Like you're gonna be fine. Like I don't know. Like it's a tough break, but you're gonna get through this.
And I think that's important to note, because I think he has that conversation with each one of them, and that's how they end up coming, you know, to terms.
The one that's the most heartbreaking for me is the Ben Stiller one.
Yeah.
Like honestly, it's funny to say like, oh, do you cry in a Wes Anderson movie? But just that scene where he has that emotional breakdown and he's chasing Eli through the house and he's like, I'm not okay. Like I need help. And then, you know, Buckley dies and Royal gets him the Dalmatian. He's like, I got you this dog, son. And it's like, that's like some pure father son shit right there, right? And then he's just like, I had a really rough year, Dad. And he's like, I know. And then like that's it. They don't acknowledge it past that. And it's just like seeing that release and like that stress of like, not to get too deep into it psychologically, but like the man, you know, like withholding it all in. Like men don't cry. We just die at 40 from like stress related heart failure.
It was like,
You know?
it was the Big Lebowski. Men do cry. Men cry. Yeah, men cry too.
My tears surprise you, sir.
Yeah, men cry too. No, strong men
Strong
cry,
men cry too.
too.
Yeah, but like that just always devastates me and like really makes me want to shed a tear every time I see that moment, you know? Because I guess you could say it's shallow and it's not deserved, but you must be watching something else, because Ben Stiller in this movie has like that Jack Nicholson Shining thing where you're like, he looks ready to explode before the confrontation even escalated.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You're like, I believe that he would have hurt his family even if they hadn't gone to the mountain, you know? And also, I think too, like one of the things I really like is that all of the kids kind of seem like they are going to become royal in one way or another. And I do think the most evident is Chaz with the two boys. And he's like, you're isolating them and you're distancing yourself from them. And you're literally going to become me if you do that. And like, that is the one like father to father advice that he gives them of like, don't become me. Like, look at how much you hate me. And now you're starting to like, the cycle's just continuing over again. And like, obviously it's because the mom dies and not because of a divorce, you know, but it just goes to show you that's like, as much as they hate him or dislike him, like they can't get away from the fact that that's their dad and like a huge part of who they are as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's like again where the characters are well written, and in terms of they seem very lived in, very thought out, very they don't just, we see a window of their life and this existed before and after. Well, yeah, before and after.
Yeah, I mean they give you, that's what all that exposition does, right? It's like, well, let's talk about this as well. I'm glad you kind of brought that up, because we could talk about the time that this movie is set in. It, like, because the aesthetic is being cooked here and fully baked. From here on out with Wes Anderson movies, you have no fucking clue what year they take place in, right? Is it a 60s movie? Is it the 70s? It's like mixing and matching, you know? It's like, I don't believe, you know, there's a pager in this movie, so you're like, what, is it at least the 80s? Or is it were pagers in the 90s? I don't even remember.
90s.
You know, so it's like, is this movie take place in the 90s? Does it take place in 1960? You know, is it, what's going on here? It's like this out of time thing. And it took me this many rewatches to kind of get it. but I think the character Dudley, the boy who has like no sense of time and anything like that, like I don't want to say that he's like a metaphor for the whole movie, but kind of like his diagnosis. Like I do think that what he has, like he has it actually, but it affects like this whole family. Like they all seem lost to time, kind of. You know what I mean? Like time has moved on. They're still wearing the same clothes they wore as kids. They go back to the old house. They're bringing up their old traumas, you know, but they're all grown adults now. So it's like this weird, like Arrested Development type of deal, you know, of like these characters are locked in right now, and that it isn't until their dad dies that they're gonna move forward past this. Until like I don't know, is he gonna take off the tracksuit after he leaves the funeral? Is that the last time he wears it? You know, it's like, is that really shedding the past and letting it go?
My favorite thing is one of my favorite small things where he talks about how funny the movie is, but that he just wears a black one. For
His dad's, he's wearing the red one the entire movie,
and then he has a
the
black one for the funeral, bro. It
This
busted
is my
out.
formal one, huh?
Yeah, and I mean, that's just back in the era, going back like tracksuits. What era is this, right?
Yeah, it's like what are you training for? Right?
Yeah,
It's because they're training the whole
Yeah,
movie. It's like
the
they're
kids
training their
too.
bodies, their minds, their. I honestly think that he's trying to, like, mask all of the emotion and hurt that he's feeling with like a military style. Like we're gonna just beat this weakness out of us.
Yeah,
you know
yeah.
what I mean? Like if we run enough and train enough, whatever, like we won't even have time to be sad.
Some Boy Scout stuff.
Yeah, right. It's really weird. It's a really weird small caveat, like that relationship, like that he had, that the Ben Stiller has with those two boys, and like I don't really know if it's a theme that is really like dug into in any of the other movies, but it seems very harsh, I'd say. You know, like I don't know. I don't think I'd want Chaz Tenenbaum to be my dad, is what I'm saying. You
Oh,
know,
no.
like, yeah, seems rough, right?
Yeah, I did think again it just starts to does reflect on the weird or the very weird relationship that he had with Royal, and that that disconnection he has with his father, and then trying to make up with it when the loss of your wife could end up being results that are very wonky, or giving you reasonings to do things that are very like unorthodox.
Yeah, definitely. Like very unorthodox, you know, like
I mean, even and that's where like the movie ends up, I think, always confusing people. Like Royal has that thought process that we have, as he thinks it's very weird how he treats the kids as well. You know, it's not like in this world everybody's like that's just how he treats kids. Even everybody in this world seems to know that this is a
this
high.
ain't right.
No,
Yeah.
and they all just kind of like, well, her wife died last year, but then Royal's the first one to kind of come and like, but yeah, it doesn't mean he should be X, Y, and Z. You know.
Yeah, and I love that. That's my favorite relationship in the movie. Even though I think Ben Stiller, I wouldn't say he's underutilized, but he doesn't have as much screen time as you think he would.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the family stuff. Who doesn't love a dysfunctional family, right? And like the more we talk about it too, it's like, how is this not relatable? The idea of a dysfunctional family. We all come from one. You know, like I'm sure someone out there would say they have a perfect family, but we all know nobody does, right?
Right.
Yeah, and I do think like at the core of it, is there a huge plot in this movie to follow? Like, no, it's not. It's just continuing the trend that we've discussed of like these movies not leading to like, they don't unravel themselves, right? Like it's just kind of laid out in front of you and you're along for the ride and you can decide if you want to join it or not. I do think that this movie, I don't know, does it beat the allegations that it has no plot? You know, it's like, it is more of a vibes based movie, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I do think the plot is Royal getting his family back.
Yeah.
You know,
But the way it is done is not like there's no 75-year plan journal on how to get my family back. You know, like it is more of a play it by ear kind of touch and go feely, you know, like, some days I'm in, some days I'm out, you know, like the movie doesn't really have this set progression of like, boom, he unlocked this child's relationship. Boom, this child. Boom, this child. Now I just got to get to the wife, you know, like it's a lot of moving around versus like progressing up and up to like a climax, you know?
that's true. I do get that.
Yeah, like I hadn't really thought about that before because honestly, the movie having like no plot, quote unquote, is something I never really even thought about as a criticism or something I liked about the movie before. I don't know. This movie really engulfs me. Like I feel like I'm sad when it's over, and it always feels like it passed by too fast. And it's one of those movies where even when I'm watching it at home too, like I don't even check my phone. You know, like I'm just so into it. So like sometimes movies like that, it's like it's kind of better that they aren't like so plot heavy of like, oh, I need to pay attention to every single detail or whatever, you know.
Yeah, that it only ends up working for certain movies, or like I guess if they're meant for you,
It's a good hang around movie, like Jackie Brown, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Dazed and Confused. Like I've heard that the Sunrise Before trilogy, whatever, the Richard Linklater movies, that those are kind of similar to that too as well. Of like, yes, they have plot and stuff, but it's more of these lived in moments with these characters that you feel like you're with them, you know?
Yeah, that is what it is, especially those movies. It's very dialogue heavy.
Yeah, Licorice Pizza, right? Where you're like, what happened in that movie? Like, well, a lot, honestly. You know, or with this, a lot. A man saved his family and brought him back together.
We lived,
but
Lois.
what actually, yeah, we lived. We lived, Royal. We lived.
Yeah, so that is, life happened.
Yeah. We lived, Ethel. Huh.
We lived.
Oh, man. Soundtrack, banger as always.
Oh, yeah, I mean,
Cast, crew, set design, all of that. Go back to the previous episode. It's the same people
it's a
still.
recurring theme. Yeah, I mean, obviously, he ends up leveling up with his homies, which commendable. And I think does end up, as you know, the third one you said here, commercial success ends up making sense after a certain while. He ends up establishing his audience at, you know, Cannes and all of these other places, and then I did think in the era this was made in, comedies had more of a love and stronghold over general audiences, and maybe it's because, like you said, there was a lot more of different ones, a lot more that we don't get anymore. But I do think he was a kind of like he was lucky enough to be able to get people interested in an era where a movie like this could get attention. I feel like
He
now
came right at the right time, huh? Like if he was 5-10 years later, he probably wouldn't have caught on the way he did, right?
because, like, you know, for me, like when I watched Fantastic Mr. Fox, it wasn't because I heard hype about this movie about how good it was. I just happened to have catched it, you know, and like at that time, I don't really end up feeling like those movies, like Royal Tenenbaums had come out at that time. I don't know if it would have ended up being as mainstream. And I know you said like the Grand Budapest Hotel ends up being the one bigger than this, right?
Yeah.
Commercially, but I think that's like the end of where a movie like that can really drive them. And his name was already established. So it just really, like you said, was perfect, because it's like, I only feel like a movie like that people went to go see because it was his fifth film or something like that.
Yeah. You know what? We're watching the movie right now. This is like a really random sidebar here, but I wanted to bring it up. The bird, Mordecai.
Yeah, Mordecai.
We haven't really talked about him at all,
True.
right? Wonderful piece of like just lived in movie thing, right? Like, oh, he's also a falconer.
Yeah.
Cool reason, just put a falcon in a movie, right?
He's a falconer. Yeah.
Yeah, and his name's Mordecai, because why not, right?
Mordecai.
What I wanted to say though is this is behind the scenes movie set life stuff. The bird. Some resident in New Jersey caught this thing while it was out flying and held it for ransom. That they wanted like a certain amount of cash to get the bird back. And we learned last time that Wes Anderson works on a tight budget, you know. Disney, American Empirical, whoever, you know, they're like, hey man, you can do your silly little thing here, but don't be asking us for extra money, right? They decided to get a different bird, and that's why the plot point of small little subplot point.
Oh,
of
the
like,
white hairs.
yeah, he's like, this bird looks different. Like he has a lot more white on him, and then he says like, oh, you know. I think they save it by doing this kind of thing where like Mordecai is kind of supposed to symbolize Richie, like his spirit animal, right? And he goes, oh, when people go through traumatic events, their hair turns white. Maybe that happened to Mordecai, right? But the truth of it all is that the bird
It's a
got
different
held
bird.
hostage.
Yeah.
They had to buy a different one.
Damn, who the fuck could just catch falcons like that, huh, too?
New Yorkers, of course.
The Falcon
Some
Whisperer.
random person pushing a shopping cart, fucking probably just ripped it out of the air, right? What was flying by.
It's like, sick bird, bro.
You're mine now. And bird's like, okay, sir. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. And how do you know who to go ask for
Damn,
money
you didn't
for,
even give
huh?
him a mouse? Like you just own him now? Yeah, I don't know. But I thought that was
That's
so
cool. That's
funny.
funny.
I was like, that perfect little random piece of lore for the Royal Tenenbaums. I don't really have too much more to say because we'll just gush. I mean, and I don't want to go on longer than the movie itself. So, any final thoughts?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think this movie ends up being most people's staple piece to Wes Anderson. I do think if the Grand Budapest Hotel isn't your favorite one, it always ends up being like this one for most people.
Some people got Moonrise Kingdom up there too. Like that's a heavy favorite.
So like I do think this one ends up just being the, like I said, Gwyneth Paltrow's character ends up being so transcended through time that I think that is what the AI machine picks up for Wes Anderson, you know? And I think it's very impressive for us, the third film in, especially because we talked about the jump from the first to the second one, and then just how the stepping stones got bigger, and he kind of is never really disappointed, honestly, because I already kind of know where this is heading. Obviously, the more we're like, but everything that follows, I mean, he just starts to get experimental. I mean, some of the ones that we ended up, like, you know, we did the French Dispatch. At that point, even before Asteroid City, he's just trying stuff now.
Yeah, because I don't want to get too ahead of myself here. I would like to save it for the next one, but it's like Steve Zissou almost seems like a slap in the face of his success. Like, huh,
You
now
thought
I can do whatever I want?
Yeah.
Watch this.
Yeah, like you thought you knew what I was doing.
Yeah, watch this. Little minis of submarines and little paper mache fishes and all of that shit goes so overboard.
Being
So, like,
actors,
yeah,
being actors.
Let's leave that for later. But yeah, Royal Tenenbaums, one of my top 10 movies of all time. When I did my own version of the Sight and Sound list that no one asked for, Royal Tenenbaums is on there for me because I do think it's one of the great American films. It's my favorite Wes Anderson film. As of today, who knows? That can always change, but it'll always have a special place in my heart. And I just do think it's truly a great film because I don't know if it's a step up in quality from Rushmore, but I do think it's parallel and right there evenly. Well, I also think that it elevates some of the things that were great about Rushmore, like okay, I did that with one guy. Now I'm going to do it with the whole family of people. Oh, I was able to do some cool set decoration. Now the whole world's going to be like that, you know? And like, I think I will love it always because of everything that comes after is reliant on this having worked.
Yeah, I
know?
agree.
So that's our take on the Royal Tenenbaums. Get that shit on Criterion, brother. Rent it on wherever you gotta rent it. Maybe if you own it, throw it on. Watch it with somebody. It's a cool movie to probably watch with your family too. Like I think it works on multiple levels for like, everyone could see something in this movie. Like you had mentioned earlier. I thought that was a really great point. But that's it for me, man. I mean, that's it for you.
Yeah, I got nothing else more to say.
All right, cool. I'm so glad we did this. I didn't know if we would ever do this movie, but I'm so glad that we're doing this whole Wes Anderson thing because it's been a really like a lot of fun just gathering all this info, seeing so much about him. I never done this before in the sense of like an actual project of like where I have to deliver weekly on like what did I learn about this person.
Yeah,
but much like Wes Anderson movies, has been extremely satisfying. So thank you as always for checking back in, and we will catch you next time for The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou.
See ya.
Bye-bye.